name is Sam Jenks, and welcome to another episode of The Way We Source, a podcast hosted by Kodiak Hub, where we share our talks with procurement practitioners, leaders, experts, consultants, content gurus, and people that we find downright inspiring, diving into the role that sourcing and procurement plays in the way we live. If you like today's episode, make sure to rate the program and give us a follow. Today, we have the pleasure of hosting the queen of classification, our spiritual guru for supplier data, cleanliness, and an all-around delight of a person. You may know her from the knowledge that she dropped in her book, Between the Spreadsheets, Edition 1 with Edition 2, coming very soon. Shelves are going to be stocked in late 2025. We'll talk about that during today's episode. She is also the founder of the Classification Guru. That's right. We're talking about the superwoman, Susan Walsh. Susan, welcome to the show, or welcome back to the show.
Thank you very much.
So happy to be able to have you. Our first Hall of Fame episode, I was just mentioning. You're the first guest to make a return appearance. How does that feel?
Oh, wow. That's super special. Yeah. And also nice that, we've kept in touch all these years because it's been a while.
Indeed. 3 years. Indeed. On the last episode, I don't remember exactly what your response was, as it was 3 years ago. But I likely asked you at that point in time what sourcing and procurement means to you, as I do with most of our guests. I'd like to know, what does sourcing and procurement mean to you today, and how does that maybe change from what you thought maybe 3 to 5 years ago?
It's definitely changed, and I know that because I've just had to rewrite Between the Spreadsheets, which I wrote 4 years ago. And I realise how much I've evolved and grown in that time. But procurement, sourcing, supply chain, it's all about delivering value. That's for me is it summed up in 2 words. Everything that procurement does delivers value. And it's not necessarily a financial value. It could be the value of keeping you out of jail, or the value of you not doing business with a risky supplier, the value of you not getting caught in a contract that you can't get out of. So there's different types of value, but I think ultimately that is what I describe it as.
And delivering value, I think, has always existed in the role, right? Or at least for those that are doing the role well.
I think that's the problem, though. I don't think procurement do a very good job of selling themselves.
Well, let's hear more about that. What do you think that procurement's doing wrong?
They're just doing their job, which is nothing wrong with that. They're just getting on and getting the job done. But Unfortunately, nobody else in the organisation sees the hard work and effort and all the things that they've stopped, the disasters they've prevented from happening. They keep everything ticking, and nobody even realizes that there was a potential disaster averted. And I think just by sharing internally and networking internally and sharing like wins and things like that, I really do think that would help go a long way to sustain the profession. Because I've even seen on LinkedIn today a post about how procurement as we know it won't exist in, 5-10 years. But I don't think that's necessarily true if we kind of raise the profile of it.
I mean, inherently, though, procurement or anything as we know it won't exist in 5 to 10 years. So that's kind of an odd statement.
Honestly, when I set this business up 8 years ago, I did not think I would still be in business. I thought technology would have taken over and solved all the world's data cleaning problems, but it's not.
Yeah.
So.
No, exactly. That there'd be a self-driving truck that is cleaning everybody's data, right? Let's get into it. For the listeners that don't know, what are you guys on a mission to achieve at the Classification Guru?
It really is about setting clients up to then clean their data so that they can maintain and own and manage their own data, put it into tech and make it usable. That's what we do. We're not here to look after it for you. I think it's really important for organizations to own and take responsibility for their own data, but it can be a really overwhelming task on where to start. So give it to us, let us deal with all that heavy lifting, and then we'll give it back to you so you can start to use it.
Now, is it primarily the value of the services you're providing? Is it kind of founded in, I would say, data cleanliness, better
100%.
classification and segmentation, and what is kind of typically that end state, that the value that you're delivering?
So a lot of the work we do is like spend classification, supplier normalization, and also a lot, you'd be amazed at how much work we do building customized taxonomies. And that's probably where you can see the biggest value, because suddenly companies can report and have insights on everything that they are selling for their business specifically. Not from an off-the-shelf generic taxonomy where things are shoehorned into the wrong category. They get real, genuine insights, and especially if you're a manufacturer, you want to know the different types of packaging and bottles and cans that you need. But then if you are in healthcare, it's really important to know about the different kind of medicines you're buying or the lab equipment. And so not just having lab equipment, but having the bits that you need, it gives so much visibility, which then impacts supplier negotiation, spend management, cost savings, even things like supplier risk and fraud. It can help spot those things.
Well, let's take this back to where you had just talked about, procurement needs to get better at talking about the value that they deliver, and ultimately that needs to be the end goal, right? Is delivering value to the organization.
Yeah.
Whether that's through, as you mentioned, savings or risk avoided, cost avoided, so forth and so on. Where does data play a role in that?
It's literally the foundation. You wouldn't build a house on a shady, rickety foundation. That data, and I think, procurement are looking at some data, finance are looking at some data, maybe supply chain are looking at data, but ultimately it's all the same data that's being used, and you need a strong foundation to then build a long-lasting house on top of that. It really... You will not have a successful tech implementation without clean, accurate data. And I'm not saying it has to be perfect here, by no means. That's just impossible. But it has to be accurate enough that you are getting reliable insights. I'm sure you see this with your clients and customers too, that if they don't clean their data before it goes in your tool, the value they get is nowhere near as high as if it's been cleaned and, it's organized and not and visible.
Yeah. Yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, the data cleanliness is all, as you say in Swedish, it's everything really, right? What do you think is, if all the teams know that there's an importance within this, you need to make sure that you're building your future, and that's future could be built up of a modern procure tech stack, right? And its foundation is good data. What is the barrier that teams have to be able to sit down and fix the data?
Well, anyone can do it, right? It's a super easy job to clean data. Like even, just give it to anybody. And that's where people are going wrong. They're not seeing the value. Right. Like clean data is an investment, not cost. And yes, you can do it yourself or get anyone in the organization to do it. But when you place it in the hands of people who are experienced in that specific type of data, it will be done faster, more efficiently, and 100% more accurately. Particularly with spend data classification, it's so subjective. Like you can have more than one right answer to classify things. You need consistency and agreement, and that, I think that's often forgotten in data as well. And even like in finance and GL codes and things, we see one supplier with 4 GL codes for the same thing, and then there's no consistency there.
No, and consistency is everything if you're going to try and be able to truly find those pockets where you can make impact, right? So understood. Data as a concept and a field, a value lever that businesses can be able to pull. It's gone through quite a vast number of, I would say, eras. And you've probably seen quite a few of them yourself, right? You've been at the pinnacle of a few of them, probably. if you were going to break down the chapters of procurement and data management into eras during maybe the last 10 to 15 to 20 years, would you be able to label maybe 2 or 3 distinct eras?
Yeah, definitely. So I've been doing this for about 13 years. So I've got a good range of experience. So when I first started out in this, procurement were not technical people, and they outsourced spend analytics and dashboards and reporting. It was all outsourced to other companies. And then in the last, even when I started my business 8 years ago, that was still the case, but it was changing. But certainly the last 5 years, you'll now find procurement analysts, BI analysts.
Yeah.
There are in-house teams now that build dashboards and run and maintain the data. That never happened before. So there's like I would say the pre-analytics stage. Then we had like analytics, and now we're in the generative analytics, or just generative stage now, because it's more than just analytics. It's doing so much more than that.
That's very interesting.
It went from nothing really, not even spreadsheets, but bits of paper to now full on, we can read your contract and tell you what's in there.
Yeah. Now, this emergence has happened, and we see it as well, like in the time that we've been in business here at Kodiak, the same, right? I mean, a lot of companies, there's a lot of emerging centers of excellence, and obviously, kind of data analysts, those that are process or program experts stand at kind of the center of a lot of those. I mean, are these necessary, do you think, to be able to succeed in such a data-rich world? Would you ever see a successful procurement team of the future that hasn't decided to be able to build up an ops or center of excellence function?
Well, it's funny that you say that, because yes, there are the analysts and the engineers and all that, but guess what? None of those, or very few of them, are trained or experienced in cleaning data. So they're very good at the technical bits. Yeah, there's this massive knowledge gap in, let's face it, it's the job that nobody really wants to do. You have to have a certain mindset to be able to enjoy it. There's definitely a sicko enjoying this, but, for me, I get a lot of satisfaction out of it. And the analysts will come and go, and eventually I'm sure a lot of the tech will take that over. But ultimately, if you don't know and understand your data and know what's right and what's wrong, you're going to have trouble.
Sorry, go ahead. Please.
No, I've worked with a lot of data analysts who do not understand procurement data at all. So you really do have like a subsection of procurement analysts. And it's very hard, because there's no black or white, yes or no answer. It is very grey. And so many data professionals really struggle with that, because in their world, it is black or white. It's 0 or 1. And it's just not like that in procurement.
Right. Interesting. Now, where do you see, for example, teams struggling the most to be able to gain the most value out of their data?
It really is the cleaning part of it, but it's the thing that always goes to the bottom of the list. It's the thing that doesn't get any budget. So then it just doesn't get done. And then we have to just work with what we've got, or somebody who's on 60, 70, 80K a year is spending a week cleaning their data. And it just doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
And it could be months. It might not even be weeks. It depends how bad it is and how big it is.
Do you believe that a data analyst can make that transition to be a solid hire in the procurement organization?
It's not a role-based thing. It's definitely a mindset-based thing. So it really would depend on a case-by-case basis. I have recruited over the years over 20 people to do spend data classification, and including some great, fantastic analysts who were terrible at classification, like classifying LinkedIn as a restaurant. because that's what it said in the description.
Why is that the case? I mean, that's where I want to double click, right? Like, why is that the case? I mean, if somebody understands data and can be able to, at a broader sense, they're talented in structuring and analyzing, right? Why is it that they struggle with particularly procurement
context? I would say context is really important. So
now let's talk about that. What do you mean by context?
So you need to look at the supplier name and the description, and then you need to think about, so when I'm training someone to classify spend data, I always say you classify it as whatever you're buying from that supplier. And a really great example would be Dell. So you'll get all your invoice line descriptions in the data, and it'll be laptop, keyboard, monitor, and then there'll be a shipping charge. Now, a lot of people who have never worked in procurement will probably classify that as a courier service, but you're not paying Dell for a courier service. That shipping is part of the product you're buying. So we would always classify that under IT hardware. And it's about not just looking at something and it being right or wrong, but thinking, okay, would this company buy this from this supplier? Does this make sense? Is this some, now we can look at things and know if a description doesn't make sense based on the supplier or the company that we're working for. And there's so much to take into consideration that's not just a type of code. Code is code, it's fact. It's not that kind of... And that's why it's so hard to build an AI tool for spend data classification, because in this supplier... And I had someone work for me who really struggled with this. 1 week we were classifying supplier A as this, but the next week the same supplier would be classified as this. And this person just could not get their head around the fact. And she was like, but you told me it was this last week. And I was like, but it was that last week. But now we're with a different company and now it's this. And so If humans are struggling to understand it, then how is AI going to understand it?
Right, because it's supposed to be able to recognize patterns, and if the pattern can change based upon the context, then it's actually the context that needs to be the pattern. I understand. That's actually really interesting. I mean, sorry, go ahead.
No, don't get me wrong. It's not that we won't get there. I just don't think we're still close enough. Not for my levels of perfectionism, anyway.
No, I think that's the future is very bright for what technology is going to be able to do. But again, it's always a tool more so than a replacement, I think, to what human intelligence is able and capable of.
It should be hand in hand. It should always be both.
100%. I mean, I personally think people are starting to form a bit of AI apathy. Maybe that's just me, right? It's AI this, it's AI that, AI powered. I mean, the fact is that it's an important technology that's going to make one of the most robust impacts, I think, in the procurement and a lot of functions in the next 5 to 10 years, period, right? With that being said, can AI really make an impact on procurement without clean data?
It's going to struggle. And you need those people to direct the AI in the right areas to where it is right and where it's wrong. If it scans a contract, how will it know if something is right or wrong without guidance from a person? It'd be interesting to see the next few years what happens, though.
Do you think if teams' data, if they have clean procurement data, that they can make real use of this technology? And if so, how? Have you seen some of your customers?
If you have a base of clean data in-house, you could build your own LLM to train your own data on how to classify, and then you could do your own refreshes. But you need it right, first of all, and you need someone who knows what they're doing to be able to check it and tweak it and all those kinds of things. And we've helped clients do that. Yeah,
exciting. Where do you see, for example, AI as a technology making the biggest impact in the procurement function, working alongside so many teams that are focused on making that push as well?
It's definitely taking on those those roles that humans don't like, that are quite laborious, that are prone to lots of errors. I mean, when we first saw document scanning and OCR come in, everyone was like, oh, it's going to take all our jobs, and actually did the stuff that, who wants to stand by a photocopier and scan things all day? That's what we used to do. It's improved things. And, there are layoffs left, right and centre right now. We have to do more with less. So anything that can help make a work day, easier, and also just, using your brain on, some people really do love and enjoy reading contracts, and good on them. There's something for everyone. Not everyone wants to sit and clean data, but I would not want to do that. I'd rather have some AI tell me the important key points of the contract and anything that might be wrong. But again, I don't know enough about that area, so I would probably want a person to just double check it and verify it too.
Yeah. I mean, the fright of, tech taking jobs is one that we hear all the time. I mean, do you really think that technology can do complex procurement operations, for example, more strategic tasks, for example, on its own?
I guess, again, context comes into play. There are some areas, like you can't just paint a broad stroke with this and apply it to everything.
No.
There will be some areas of procurement, like buying nuts and bolts and MRO and stuff. Yeah, you could probably automate a lot of that, because it's like, right, we're using this much a month, we need to buy this more. But when it comes to, I guess, like hiring creatives for stuff, that's a very different kind of, you need people involved in that.
Right. There's an assessment.
Like getting a marketing agency in, that's not something that you could leave to just AI to make a decision, because it's not going to make a decision based on the right things.
No. And hopefully the marketing agency doesn't bring in their AI tool to try and do the marketing for you. Have you seen some of these new commercials that are AI generated? Absolutely just bad.
And then they're talking, but their mouth's not quite at the same bit. And it's like, oh, please, guys.
Let's shift back to something analog. Your book.
A book?
Between the Spreadsheets.
Yeah, hang on. There is a very well-used copy sitting here. It's got stains in it. Oh, look. Also comes with a bookmark now.
Love it. For those of you that can't see and are listening, Susan is holding up a copy.
I'm waving a book around, so that's not really going to help people.
So tell me, Susan, the second edition is coming out. Where is it that you're kind of taking this to differ and or be an extension of the first volume? It's
definitely leveled up. Gen AI didn't exist when I wrote this first book. And so now there's a whole chapter on what it is, where it works, proof of where it works, proof of where it doesn't work, and where it needs, like, spend data classification. Real examples of where you can really leverage what you're doing. And even there's a new European law coming into place soon where all images have to have text, for document readers and things. So I had to put text to image kind of for all of them. ChatGPT did that up for me. I didn't do any. It came up with better descriptions than I could have, and it took me an afternoon to do it, whereas it probably would have taken me a couple of days. So there's that chapter. Well, I've updated the data horror stories chapter, which everybody loves. And I've also put a new case studies chapter in. So actually talking people through a couple of different case studies and projects that we've done step by step on how we tackled the process, what we did, what the benefits to the client were. So yeah, really excited about that.
Very exciting. Yeah, we're looking forward to getting a copy or two for the office here.
Absolutely. And then I don't know if you know this, but I'm actually now writing another book for a different publisher, Kogan Page. It's a sales and marketing data cleaning book specifically. So that will be coming out in 2026. So yeah, I must be mad, really. Must be mad.
Data all day and books by night. Yeah, I mean, writing a book is no small feat, and writing 3 is
I said,
a real
after the
achievement.
first one, I said never again. I really did. I was like, that's
And here
it.
you
Nope,
are.
nope, 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 nope. And then what am I doing? Never say never.
In the first volume of Between the Spreadsheets, you coined the COAT methodology related to data quality. Do you mind just walking us through that and the importance of the COAT methodology, but also how the COAT methodology can be applied in an organization?
Yeah, the real trouble is that most of the data problems are at the point of input. So whether that's a customer name or product information or whatever it is. And a lot of the time, the people who are inputting the data aren't even data professionals, because data professionals should know better, really.
Right.
But we need to get everybody engaged and involved in having better, cleaner data. So I thought that the data quote was a great kind of analogy methodology that could be applied, that everybody would find memorable and interesting and potentially want to apply to their data. So first up, it's got to be C is for consistency. So make sure you're using the same language, units of measure, terminology in your data, even the way you input or classify your data or set up your suppliers. Make sure everybody does it in exactly the same way to help with the consistency. That's going to minimize those errors. And then organize it too. So assign the correct GL codes, the right categories, the right region that it belongs to, the right address. Make sure it's easy to find that information when someone asks you about it. And then, of course, it needs to be accurate, but define what accurate is, whether that is we need these specific data points for each supplier, or whether that's, our numbers have to be 100% right. Decide what that is. So once it's consistent, organized, and accurate, it then becomes trustworthy. And that's something that we hear a lot is, we don't trust the data.
Right.
And so it will help minimize those errors. I'm not naive enough to think it's going to solve the world problems, but people really enjoy the data quotes. And even there's an institution in the US that's actually asked permission to use it as part of their data training, which is a huge honor. I can't say who it is, but I'm super excited about that, that it's valuable enough to be in somebody's training documents. That's something to be really proud of.
Absolutely. Very exciting, and a good framework that I think anybody can be able to be inspired by at the least, right?
Yeah.
When it comes to accuracy, because you made me think of something there that we talk about all the time, right? It's so important that whenever, obviously, a new customer is adopting new technology, and I'm sure that you probably experience this as well in a lot of the projects that you're working within, that, they don't allow perfection to become the enemy of progress.
And I often hear fit for purpose rather than accuracy as well.
Right. And I'm curious, how do you see, how do you advise businesses to get past that, right? To not be focused on quote unquote 100% accuracy, but instead be focused on the fit for purpose element of the accuracy?
Honestly, I don't think there are many organizations out there that are aiming for perfection. In fact, if anything, I would want them to increase their base levels. I hear 70 or 80% right is good enough. No, it's not, because you don't know what 70 or 80% is right. It could be the bad. You can have massive spend that is wrong. So it doesn't matter if that 80% is right. If it's all $2 and $3 line values, that doesn't matter. So it's make it work. What is right for your organization? What is the minimum that you need to be able to do your job properly, and what's acceptable? And always challenge yourself to just be a little bit more than that minimum that you think.
It's a great insight. Great insight. What is your minimum threshold, right?
And everyone's will probably be different.
Right.
I just posted today what's your data personality? And there's like 10 personalities. So one of them, which is definitely me, is the perfectionist. But there's one called the I'll do it later, the one that always leaves it. There's the rebel who always breaks the rules and doesn't put things in properly. They do it their way. There's the hoarder who, keeps all their data, doesn't share it. So yeah, there's different types of people.
I have one or two of those I'll do it later working in my sales team in the CRM. I can tell you that much.
Yeah. And also I think it depends on the data as well. Different priorities.
100%. And that's all jokes, all fun. Just kidding, guys, if anybody's hearing this. Can you share with us? I mean, you got to hit us with at least one data horror story. It feels right.
Oh, okay. I'll go on then. Actually, I can tell you my own personal one from a project we did last summer. It was 250,000 row CRM full of schools, councils, universities. So you would think, not too bad. Couldn't spell university right, couldn't spell school right, couldn't spell primary right.
Right.
The address was wrong, but the postcode was right. Or the address was wrong, but the address was right, but the postcode was wrong. Or both the address and the postcode were wrong, but didn't match together. One record it would be Grove Road, and the next one it would be Grove Drive. So, and then you have to go and figure out if it's a road or a drive. Like loads of stuff like that. It was the most challenging data set I have ever worked with in my 13 years of doing this. It was never-ending mess. And then also some of the schools had closed or they had changed names. Nothing matched up. Things like, a Roman Catholic school might be spelled out Roman Catholic High School, or it might be RC High School. Loads of stuff like that. So abbreviated, non-abbreviated, which it creates multiple versions of the same account.
Right.
And again, it could be the same school with the same postcode, but there could be 3 records with 2 different addresses. Like it was, and there was no quick way to verify what was right and what was wrong. Because you couldn't rely on the postcode for it to be right, and you couldn't rely on the name for it to go and check on. So,
the importance here of also organized input and a consistent framework to work within, as you talked about before. I'm curious. This was your Everest. I mean, how did you trek that mountain?
Very slowly. Also, so again, I tried ChatGPT. I thought, I was like, I did 15 sample schools in Aberdeen. Here's the name, here's the postcode. Can you confirm the address? And I think 5 of the 15 were correct. It hallucinated 10 of the first line addresses. Now I already had a first line address. So what it did do was I ran all the data through, and anything that matched what I had in the system from ChatGPT, I was like, okay, it's a safe assumption to say that is correct. So that all went to the side and got cleaned up, just, removed spaces, commas, made it all the same casing.
Right.
And then everything that was left, it was Uncle Google. And I just had to go in and Google because, like I say, the address could be wrong and the name could be wrong. Or, some of them didn't even have addresses or even say what area that it was in. And if you've got something called St. John's High School, do you know how many high schools in the UK are St. John's High School? Like, some of them, like, you would just have to scrap because it was just absolutely nuts. And it was hard going. It was frustrating, but it was so satisfying once it was cleaned.
The perfectionist was then so happy.
Clean. Yeah.
Very nice.
And then they suddenly could see truly how many institutions or companies or suppliers they had, with the right information because it's all going into a new system.
But a horror story that it sounds like you made it through, at least. And we hope to hear more of those stories in the second edition of Between the Spreadsheets.
Some good ones, yeah.
Make sure
they were all anonymously donated by my connections on LinkedIn as well. So these are true life, real people stories.
Lovely. And I hope that everybody goes and gets a copy of that when the second edition is out. If you're interested in the first volume, then check it out as well. We're actually going to be hosting a webinar. That's the only other thing that I wanted to make sure that people knew, of course. And I believe that this episode is going to be released before the webinar is hosted. I sure hope so.
Well, the webinar will be on demand otherwise. You can watch it anytime. So
absolutely. And you're going to be giving your take a little bit on kind of the importance of the foundation of supplier information and or data and the cleanliness of that data to have the success of AI, right? Otherwise...
Yeah. What you're going to love is some really dirty supplier data that I'm going to share and how it got cleaned and made nice and perfect and shiny.
Fantastic. I think that it's going to be a good session and good insights and practical tips for people to be able to...
Yeah, but also like learn about what you guys and how your tool can really help leverage that as well.
Yeah, for sure. Can I ask you, where do you think that businesses, for example... that aren't in a position to be able to purchase services of the Classification Guru, even though they would like to, where is it that they can be able to start, right? Like a real tactical tip or two for those that are out there.
Honestly, I'm not kidding. Between the Spreadsheets is literally a how-to, step-by-step, clean your data, classify it in Excel. So that is the basics. For $36.99, you can get everything that you need. If that is still too much of a stretch, start small. Start on a test set of data, kind of figure out what you're really dealing with. You know, don't just focus on like the high value stuff. Look at like mid, lower spend too, because quite often, you know, people will focus on the high spend stuff, and if that looks good, that's great. It's all good to go. And actually a lot of the problems are hidden like in the tail. And so do spot checks, get a feel for what's wrong, and then prioritize what needs to be sorted first. So, for example, excuse me, talking too much. When we classify or clean a data set, we don't do it row by row. We will start by normalizing the supplier names. Then we might clean the postcodes next, and then we might do the cities. And then we might do the addresses or the emails or the phone numbers. And so prioritize what's most important within your data that you need to clean first. And it's more efficient to do it that way than row by row by row by row.
Very interesting. Maybe P-coat then, right? Prioritize might be one of those elements that you could add into your acronym.
Oh, yeah,
it's your acronym. I'm just making suggestions here.
I've had people contact me in the past because they didn't like trustworthy as a T. They wanted it to be timely. And
why so?
Well, I think it's a perspective thing because I'm working with procurement data, so it does need to be trustworthy. But I would say in the wider data space, timely data might be more important to a lot of people. But obviously, you know, when I first created this, which was at least 5 years ago now, that just wasn't even on my radar. So, you know, but you know what? This is your quote, you know, make it what you need it to be.
Amazing. Well, thank you for dropping some knowledge on our listeners today. It's a pleasure every time we have the opportunity to be able to talk. The first Hall of Fame episode, fantastic to have you back. I know that James Meads, we're also doing a Hall of Fame episode with. He's going to be really sad that you beat him to the punch. You know,
I'm going to see him soon, so I'll be winding him up.
Listen, before we let you go, quick fire round, a few questions to be able to know the queen of classification, the guru, Susan Walsh, a little bit more as a person, more so than just an expert on all things.
What? You mean I'm not a robot after all?
I don't think so, but we'll find out very soon. First question.
Okay.
All expenses trip paid by Kodiak Hub. How generous of us. To you, you're heading out.
Like, is this binding? Legally binding?
I'm not sure if verbal offers are legally binding in the podcast settings. We'll have to check the podcast bylaws. Regardless, all expenses paid. Yeah. You're headed out tomorrow, and you could be able to take a friend or head yourself. Where are you going?
Maldives.
Ooh, very nice. I actually just saw a reality series where the main characters were there, and it looked fantastic.
I had my first ever trip there last summer, and I'm in love with the place. I constantly think about being back there.
Ah, well, on a bad day, that's where you can dream away to, of course, as well. We hope you get back there very soon. Then
I know.
All right.
Until then, I've got my screensaver on my phone.
Fantastic. A podcast or a book that's, something on your bedside stand or that you're listening to often, whether that's, for example, something in a professional context or a personal context that you'd like to give our listeners as a little bit of a tip.
So I love true crime. And there's a podcast called Small Town Murder, but it's done by two comedians. So you have to have a very open mind and sense of humor for that. But also Crime Junkie is a really good one. That's a bit more family friendly.
Well, I'm sure that there's one or two true crime fans out there that are listening in as well. So
yeah.
Good tip. If you didn't work in procurement, which of course you're now on the vendor side of procurement, right? Servicing to clean data and make sure that people have a solid classification. But if you didn't work in the procurement space, where do you think you would do instead?
That's so funny because I was just asked that this week on a different podcast. And my answer was, I don't know, but I'd probably have another business. This is my second business. My first business was a women's clothes shop. So I've been all over the place. I've done a lot of different things. So I'm not quite sure what it would be, but it would be some kind of business.
An entrepreneur is always an entrepreneur. Yeah. So I think
I've got a million ideas every day.
Well, hey, I'm happy that you had the idea to join us today. Thank you so much for taking the time. Is there anything that you'd like to leave our listeners with, something that you'd like to plug, and or, for example, how anybody can be able to get in touch should they want to know more about your services or just be a part of your network?
I'm on LinkedIn. If you need anything, you know where to find me. I think just do something. It doesn't have to be an awful lot, but do something. Small steps will make big differences.
You heard it here first. Superwoman Susan Walsh. Thank you so much for today.
Thanks.